to Book 2, Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for my December wrap-up. Now, unfortunately, I only finished 3 books, although I read more than 3 books. But that's okay. So, first, I read the second book in the Oz series, the Marvelous Land of Oz, by Frank L. Baum, which follows a similar formula to Wizard of Oz, except, our main character, it's different characters, obviously. Our main character is this young boy named Tip, he's an orphan, but was kind of raised by this witch, I'm assuming a head witch, Mombi, who was very cruel and mean to him. And one day he decides to create this creature, Pumpkinhead. I don't remember what the body's made of, but this creature has a head for a pumpkin for a head, and calls him Jack Pumpkinhead. And he also makes a sawhorse. And they end up crossing paths with the Scarecrow, who recently got his throne in Emerald City usurped by one of the women that works in the Emerald Palace, whose now name escapes me. I knew it before. And the Scarecrow wants to reclaim his throne, and they seek help from the Tin Woodman, who is an emperor of the Winky Country. So they go on a quest to get back to the Emerald City and fight the women that have taken over Emerald City. So this is very much like the first one. Like I said, it's also a quest. It's a quest story. They're traveling across the Yellow Brick Road. There's all these unique characters that they come across. We also return to some old favorites. I've already said the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman reappear in this one. We also cross paths with Galinda, and we I think that's all the characters that are from the the first book. But we also have new characters. Like I said, Tip, this little boy who he's very different from Dorothy. He's a little more, he's not as, he doesn't take as much. He's kind of feisty, tough, has kind of had to be tough. And of course he grew up in this world, so he is more familiar with it. And he's also very lonely. He doesn't have a family like Dorothy did. And he doesn't, he's not as much he doesn't always take the annoying aspects of the other characters as easily. Like Dorothy she's just nice. And Tip is not that he's mean or a bully or anything, but, whenever the characters, annoy him, he gets annoyed too. And, he tries to tell them not to do, okay, you guys gotta, just chill out and stop, and consider other people. Other people might not appreciate your quirks or habits as you do. And of course, the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman are basically the same. They're very friendly and everything and fun-loving, but they're also kind of a little cocky and have this little bit of pride in their, sometimes almost too much pride in their supposed gifts the wizard gave them, which it's funny because another character points out, is like, oh, I thought the wizard wasn't really that great, and he's kind of a fake and everything. Or, of course, I would say charlatan, but I don't think they know that word. And the Scarecrow and the Tin Man are like, no, how dare you? The wizard is great. He gave us these wonderful gifts and everything, which it shows that they do appreciate their gifts. Even if they really, in the end, they didn't need them. It was just a symbol. And, the wizard was trying to make them feel better about themselves when really they didn't need, the message of the original Wizard of Oz was it was always inside of you, and you always, the Tin Woodman always had a heart. He was always kind and compassionate and sympathetic to others and cared about others and loved them. And The Scarecrow was always smart. He was slowly, gaining knowledge, even though he started out as just a scarecrow hanging on a piece of wood. He slowly learned things, and he was always smart in his own way. And the Cowardly Lion always had courage, and he was always brave. He just needed a little help, needed a little guide and a little push. And it's okay to be a little scared at times. No, he's not in this book, in this case. It's just the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman in this one, in Glinda, of course. And you have you have Mombi the Witch, which I was a little disappointed. I wanted to see a little bit more action with her, a little more of a threat with her. I feel like the Wicked Witch of the West was, well, actually, no, now that I think about it, because, I was reminded that in the original Wizard of Oz, she's only in chapter 12. She only plays a big role in chapter 12 in the original, in Wizard of Oz. Like, she seems a lot more scary in the movie because they have her sprinkled throughout the movie in the stage show, so that's probably why she seems a lot scarier. But like there's the Mombi sets traps for Tip and all his companions, and it ends up being that they're all like fake. They're all like not real. They're just an illusion. And granted, she's a hedge witch, but still, I was kind of like, really? You kind of make it at least a little bit dangerous? But then again, this is a kid's book, so they probably didn't, Frank L. Baum probably didn't want to traumatize kids. So maybe I'm thinking too much of this as an older reader. But I just wish that there had been a little more, like, I mean, they did find themselves in dangerous situations. I can't remember what the birds were called, but they did run across birds and got trapped in their nest and almost got eaten by these birds. And Jack Pumpkinhead was always worrying about there was always a threat to him being his pumpkin head being spoiled. Which, let me go ahead and talk about the new characters other than Mombi. So you have Jack Pumpkinhead, who I kind of felt bad for him because he was very naive and young, and he was constantly asking questions because he just didn't understand things. He was like a child. He wanted to know things, and he was always worried, oh my god, what's going to happen to my head? Because he doesn't know what's going to affect his pumpkin head. He doesn't know what could harm it, what could spoil it, because if his head gets spoiled, it basically means he dies. So of course he's scared, and of course he's going to ask questions. And all the other characters were just annoyed and were tired of answering his questions, his constant pestering them. So I can see where, as some, I can see how that can get annoying as an adult. Because first of all, adults don't know everything, and and sometimes, and, there's only so much we can explain to a kid. Like, so I can, and also just be kind of like, enough of the questions already, give me a break. So I can understand there being kind of, little like, okay, shut up, enough of the questions. But at the same time, he can't help it. He wants to know things. He's curious, and he's afraid, and he doesn't understand things because, like I said, he's like a kid. He was just born. While Tip, who seems a little bit more mature, even though he's still a kid himself, he's not like a newborn. He's been in this world for a while, and he's experienced hardships for a long time. So, and it's kind of cute how Jack Pumpkinhead sees Tip as his father, as a father figure. Like someone to take care of him and answer his questions and protect him. And Tip, who is still, like I said, he's still a kid himself, even though he's a little bit more mature and he's had more world experience. At the same time, he's still a child himself. And he can't take care of everybody. But yeah, he's very, he's very curious, Jack Pumpkinhead. I kind of liked him. He was a very sweet character. I think kids would really like him. But also might get potentially annoyed by him at the same time. And then we have the Soul Horse, who's very snarky and sarcastic and just doesn't take anyone's crap. Kind of rolls his eyes at the others. you know, so he's kind of the straight-laced character, you know. And then we have the Wogglebug, who is this giant bug who has an education, apparently. He became educated, so he's very braggy. He's kind of like the Scarecrow in that way. Like, both of him and the Scarecrow are very braggy. And like, oh, I'm so smart. And like, the only difference is that the Scarecrow has basic knowledge, while the Wogglebug has specific knowledge. Like, it's like he went to school, basically. Wow, the Scarecrow just has enough to get by and survive in the world. Like, he has street smarts, while the Wogglebug has book smarts. Let's put it that way. And he kind of got on my nerves more so than the other characters. And this is where I was talking about earlier about Tip. That Tip is like, okay, dude, you're kind of being an arrogant ass. You need to chill out and stop. You know, you need to tone it down a little bit. Like, I get that you're intelligent and you're proud of your intelligence, but you don't need to rub it in everyone's faces. Because he will say, you know, witty things and clever remarks, you know, puns and stuff like that. Because he's like, oh, look at me, I know all this. I'm so clever. And the others, it goes over the others' heads, or they take it very literally and they don't understand it. They don't and they kind of feel like dumb around him. And Tip has like, okay, you need to stop with that. And I think, but now the Wogglebug, he does feel bad about it, and he does try to stop, but he's like, I can't help it. You know, I know all these things. I'm so proud of my knowledge and everything. And it's like, it's on the one hand, you're like, well, yeah, you do have more self-control than you give yourself credit for. But I think sometimes there are people who are so intelligent that they feel they want to share their knowledge and they don't think about it. And I probably do that at times too, because I read a lot. And, you know, I'm sure maybe a lot of you can be like that too. You feel proud and you kind of want, and you don't mean to be mean about it and rub it in people's faces that I'm smarter than you are. But yeah, at the same time, he kind of got annoying and was like, you know, again, I was thinking, you know, like Tim, I was like, chill out, dude. You know, we get it. You're so smart. Like, it doesn't mean you need to rub it in everyone's faces. So, of course, there was a big, you know, but yeah, so this one it was kind of fun. They had some quirky characters. We do go back to the Emerald City at one point. And of course, there's some things in there like feminism comes into play. Like, you can see the influences of, you know, Elbaum's mom, who was a feminist of the time, and of a suffragette, I believe is what I read. And so you can definitely see the influence with the whole storyline of the women taking over and trying to get, you know, taking the throne from the Scarecrow. And he does start to, you know, wonder and question himself throughout the story if he deserves the throne, if it is his right to have it. Glinda wasn't in there as much, but she's still, you know, still the same, you know, very happy and helpful, trying to, you know, give good advice and help the other characters. And I also like how these books kind of like explore creativity and show kids how to be a little more creative, like ways you can, and also, of course, you know, how to treat others and not to brag all the time, and about your, you know, if you have what you consider a gift. Yeah, so it was fun. I enjoyed it, you know. I wish I had read the series when I was younger, but I got to the Wizard of Oz movie first before I read the books. But I did enjoy it. I would like to introduce, you know, my nephews and niece to the Wizard of Oz series. I would love for them to read it now before they get too old for it. And they can enjoy it and not be like, well, this doesn't make any sense, or, oh, I don't know, it's hard for me to get into it because I'm too old for it, that kind of feeling. So maybe I can get them the Oz books one day, soon, ideally. So I'll probably read the rest of the series throughout the year. I want to make sure I do that because I've been meaning to do that for a while. Like, my sister had got me the Oz books, some of them. I don't have all of them. Not just, and not this, but separate books. So I want to, and I actually want to read the rest of the series. I don't want to say that I'm going to read it and then not read it for like years, which has already happened. Okay, so next we have, so after that one, I read A Passage to India by A.M. Forster. This was really good. I thought about doing a separate review. I still might do it. I don't know yet though. Maybe I'll wait until after the new year, after New Year's. But this one I've been told is very different from his other books. I mean, it's obviously very different from A Howard's End. So it takes place in India. It's during the time of when the British took over India and colonized it. And what I didn't talk about last time I talked about this book, I did not think about the fact that I'm the last month of the year I've read this one, and in the beginning of 2004 I read, which I'm currently rereading, and I'll talk about that after this since I've only have 3 books to talk about before I wrap up. I'll talk about what I'm currently reading. In the beginning of the month I read Touch Me Not by Jose Rizal, which is also about colonialism, but it's colonialism in the Philippines and when Spain took over the Philippine Islands, which apparently Europe just loves taking over, loves colonizing people. But anyway, so we have the book focus on these two, Miss Moore and Adela, and this young woman Adela, who's going to considering marrying Miss Moore's son, who is a diplomat in India. And so they're visiting the country, and of course they're in the part of the world the city where there's a lot of British influence, so they feel like they're not experiencing the real India by being here, and Miss Moore ends up running into, while visiting one of the mosques, she runs into a Dr. Aziz, and they become friends after an awkward first meeting, and he ends up taking them to these caves, the Marbar. I don't know what the caves are called. These caves in India that actually I don't think are real caves. I don't think they really do exist in India. He takes them to these caves, these famous caves, and the women separate. And while exploring one of the caves, something happens to Adela. She has an encounter, and it looks like she was attacked. She was assaulted, and she assumes it's Dr. Aziz, and he gets arrested and has to go on trial. Like I said, this is all about exploring colonization when England colonized India. So you see already the tensions are building between these two countries, and the struggles and how suppressed the Indians feel, and how they're dismissed and treated like horribly by the British, but some of them are just accepted their fate, accepted their situation. But of course, not all of them, like Dr. Aziz, are accepting this and are staying true to their countries and their culture and their country's beliefs. And it's interesting, the way he meets Miss Moore is he finds her in the mosque, and he just assumes that, like most of the British, she's not respecting being in the mosque and not taking off her shoes. And he immediately is like, orders her to take off her shoes and gives her a hard time, and she's, telling him, no, I did. And he does realize his mistake, and he does become friends with her, and he sees her as probably the only British person that he respects, that he likes, and he enjoys talking to her, sees her as a friend, and cares about her. in fact, Adela, he does not like at all, because it's not that she's directly, and Adela is just naive and very blind, and just kind of is a victim of her own country and the way they treat these people. She doesn't know any better. She doesn't understand. She's ignorant and just, doesn't see her behavior or the things that she says as offensive. At one point, she compares her, her engagement to Miss Moore's son to the relationship between India and the British. And leaves a bad taste in the mouth of Dr. Aziz. He does not like that. He really gets mad at her comparing the two of them. Which kind of, and it kind of foreshadows how their relationship and how they don't really understand each other, and he doesn't like her, he doesn't trust her, and he's just not comfortable with her, and she's just trying to be nice to him, and she's trying to be nice to him, but it comes out wrong. She doesn't understand or appreciate the consequences of her actions. But she tries to make up for it later, tries to, redeem herself in his eyes, but it doesn't exactly work out. He can just never forgive her, never really accept her. But yeah, it's really, but it's interesting because the Indians aren't exactly saints either. They, they have a lot of anger towards the British, but they have assumptions too about them, and it's not like they're not perceived, like I said in this book, they're not seen as bad people or good people either. And in the end of the day, the British still are the true antagonist, because they're very self-centered and just don't respect this other culture and have this arrogance and are like, oh, we can improve you, we can make you better because we're superior. And that's exactly what happened in the Philippines, where the Spanish were like, oh, we're the superior culture. We're so much better than you. We're going to make you better because you're all savages. And that's probably that's how they see them. And the English see the Indians as, oh, they're savages. We're doing them a favor. It's very condescending, actually. But it's a very thought-provoking book. It's a very sad book as well. But it did take me a while to get into it because the beginning is very slow. You're just being introduced to the characters and the situation at hand, and it doesn't really pick up until the second part of the story. When the action kind of starts to happen. And when they're traveling to the cave. So it's a while before we get to them going to the caves. So you gotta have some patience if you want to keep going with this. And I still think it's worth the read. I still think it's a very good book and worth exploring. And now Ian Forster did go to India, so he wrote this from experience. I mean, there's still some biases, as he's an English gentleman and everything, but he at least was there, and he's not writing it from his own imagination, so you can trust that the things he's talking about, he knows what he's talking about, he understands it, and there is a character that's kind of a stand-in for him. I cannot remember the character's name at the moment, but we also explore that character's relationship with Dr. Aziz as well, and how they start as good friends. They really respect each other and care about each other. But after this event where he's accused of attacking Adele, is that her name? I'm trying to think of that. I want to double check, make sure that's her name, because okay. I can't find it. It's gonna take me too long. I think that's her. I think it's Adela. Is So I'm talking about Aziz and this other character. And after that event, it kind of changes their relationship. Because even though he defends Aziz and is supporting him, trying to help him, this other character, who is still not entirely, he's not seen as one of the British anymore because he sides with the Indians, but then the Indians cannot trust him anymore because he's one of them. He is still an Englishman, and he can never understand how they feel. He can't understand their anger as an Englishman. And this other character does kind of feel for Adela and wants to help her too. And I think that is what makes it worse, is that, this feels like a betrayal to Dr. Aziz. That's why part of the relationship could never be the same again. Because he feels like he's siding with her, which is not true. He just feels bad for her and doesn't see her as a monster. Just a naive young woman who doesn't realize like I said, does not realize the consequences of her actions. But yeah, this whole situation changes all the characters in a way and really shines light on the situation and shines light on the horrors of colonialism and what happened to all these people. Now, it's interesting, though, if you think about it, reading this now, it's like, if the British hadn't colonized America, then we all wouldn't be here. So it puts us in a predicament of, we can't change the past. And we can't, we all might not be, or at least we might not all be here if that didn't happen. Now, it's different with this one, obviously, because, we're in America. This is India. But yeah, lately there's been a lot of books about colonization coming out lately. There's been a handful of them, or at least ones that I'm made aware of. There's also Babel by R.F. Kuang, which I haven't read. I keep starting it and then stopping it. But I definitely need to read it this year. That's also kind of about a look at colonization and also exploring translation and everything, and just, but yeah, this was very good. I enjoyed it. It's a sad book, and like I said, it's slow in the beginning, takes a while, and it's not like a super fast-paced book anyway, but it's, it's a very, I at least think it's worth the read. So the last book I read that I actually finished before Christmas was Dragon Shadow by Catherine L. Catherine White. This is the sequel to Heartstone, so this is gonna be kind of hard to talk about. But it's either talk about it a little bit or talk about only 2 books. So the first one is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but the characters, like the Darcy character in this case, Alistair Daird, he is a dragon rider, so this is a fantasy take on the story with magical creatures, and our character, Eliza and her sisters have to fight, all these monsters all the time, these creatures. And Daird shows up, and it follows the beats of Pride and Prejudice, but there's a bigger war going on. There's a bigger conflict going on around the world. There's this, what they call the Great Worm. It might be coming out to show up and start a war and everything, and they have to fight that. They might have to fight that creature, this Great Worm. So in this one, it picks up where the first one left off, and the characters kind of an aftermath, dealing with the situation and what happens next, where the character is a bit of a, is it happily ever after for the characters, or, how are they going to deal with life now? I guess because most people have read Pride and Prejudice, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be a spoiler that it has a happy end. The first book does have a happy ending. The characters, Daird and Eliza, I don't know how to say her name, they get married and live happily ever after. Well, in this one, it's about their married life, And Eliza is trying to figure out her role and her relationship with him because he's a dragon rider, and she herself isn't. She's what they. She is of a different class, like a different group, and now it's escaping what they kept. The Nakla, that's what they call her. She's a Nakla. I don't remember what the definition of it is, but she is seen as beneath him. She's not a warrior, and people don't take her seriously. And she's very much still struggling with that insecurity of, yeah, he chose her, but she's still seen as, oh, you're a Nakla, you're not a warrior. And she wants to prove herself, and, because of what happened to her sister all those years ago, which is not a spoiler, it's in the beginning of the first book, she wants to fight the monsters herself. Like, at first, she's very scared in the first book of fighting these monsters and learning how to be a warrior. But in this one, now she's gung-ho and a little bit reckless and ready to fight and stuff. And doesn't want to just get left behind. And wants to prove her worth to her husband and to everybody else. And be like, no, I'm not just a Nakla. I am a warrior too. And I can fight. I can protect people. And so we're going to deal with that. And at the same time, you have Dared, who... his issues are in this book that he gets, after what happens to him, after, he gets injured in the first book, and he's kind of trying to deal with the fact that he is not the same warrior he was. And his more, like, his ego has been bruised, and is he worthy of the Dared name? Is he a fighter? So both of them kind of struggle with their insecurities, and it kind of comes between them a little bit. I mean, the good news is I think they do eventually get to a healthy point in their relationship. So in this one, they are called to another kingdom to protect them from this monster who has shown up, and Eliza starts to realize that maybe the war isn't over, and there might be monsters out there that, that the Great Worm was only the beginning. And there might be more coming. There might be a bigger threat to their world than she realizes. And they, after some persuading, she comes with Dared on this mission because she doesn't want to leave him. She wants to prove herself to him. And they cross paths with all these other creatures that don't trust them, and they have to protect these different places. And there's throughout, before they leave, they kind of do learn that there are a lot of other places that are being threatened, other monsters. But they decide to choose this one kingdom because it has a bigger problem. It's an immediate problem they can resolve. He can do the job and everything. So we get to see more of this world, which I really like. I like that we leave the setting of the first place of the first book, and we go to all these different other parts of the world and go to another kingdom, another village, and meet all these new characters throughout. And there is kind of an antagonist in the book that's like, they're not like doing it for, for vindictive reasons, but more, you did something wrong, I'm going to punish you for it, kind of thing. We also have a lot of characters that are kind of that are keeping secrets from Dared and Eliza, and it kind of adds to the tension of they don't know who they can trust, who's telling them the truth, and they're trying to protect these people, and like not everybody is telling them everything they need to know. And it's like, what the hell, guys, you gotta tell us these things. How are we supposed to protect you if you don't tell us? And they're like, well, you're just gonna have to protect us the best way you can. And it's a very frustrating situation. We do meet some other new characters, new creatures. There's one that is living underneath a palace that like kind of is a metalsmith, I think, or something. I don't remember. That was a very interesting creature. Kind of a Golem-like in a way. Not Gollum from Lord of the Rings, but a Golem in Jewish culture, Jewish religion or mythology, I should say. And also it kind of is another book that deals with a woman feeling trapped in her marriage and like the man choosing for her, and her being like, no, I'm not having it. Why can't you, just let me be, let me do my own, let me have my own life. Even if you love me, I I'm not yours to own kind of relationship. Um Also, there might be a character coming back in this book that came back in this book that was introduced in the first book. That's just a bunch of spoilers I'm going to give you. And although I don't know, some people might think this is very spoilery, but it's just really hard for me to review. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll mention in my wrap up that just there are mild spoilers. There might be, and you might consider this spoilery. Cannot say that word. So there's a lot of, so at least there's a lot of great world building. We get to see more of the world, and character building as well, and getting to know, learning more about Aliza and Dared, and getting to know them as a couple a lot more, which is kind of nice. I like how this book allows to go beyond marriage. Like, you see, the book is about a married couple. It's not just about a couple that's still dating, going on this quest to save the world, but it's also, they're married, so it's about them being married and the struggles of that, of getting to know each other even more and realize that you gotta live together now, and the possibility of wanting to have children with that person and not knowing and how you're gonna handle that, and whether, when the possibility of that might not be possible, or if it is, how are we gonna be as parents? Are we gonna be good parents? Are we gonna be bad parents? Like, exploring a lot of those topics as well in this book. And and I guess that's it. All I want to say about this one. This was a really great. I also really like the cover. I think the cover is really pretty. Just this reminds me of Cinderella's castle a little bit, like the castle in Europe, which makes sense because this is a European inspired story. But yeah, this was really fun. I like this as a sequel, and I'll be reading the third book soon. I think I'm gonna read in January, so I don't fall behind, because there was plenty of space between the first book and reading this one. So I want to make sure I read the third book right away. So those are the three that I finished: The Marvelous Land of Oz, The Passage to India, and Shadow Dragon. Now, currently, so like I said, for Christmas we went to see my grandmother. So before I left, I did start reading. Came back to this Grace of Kings. I definitely can see why people will say this is more like a prologue. It's kind of just introducing each part of the situation of the conflict for these characters and kind of setting things up type book. I mean, I still don't know if I would call this a prologue, but I can see why people consider it a prologue. But that's because, in my mind, prologues are short, like brief scenes and stuff like that, while this is an actual full-on book giving us the setup. So I did not bring it with me when we went to go see my Lola. But I am a little bit farther along this time, at least. Okay, so, so the books I'm currently reading that I did. Crap. Oh, sorry, I just flew on my hands. Also, you guys know I did start reading the light of all that falls. I've been saying the title wrong this whole time. It's actually The Light of All That Falls. I have not picked it up lately, so I don't have anything to say about that one, but I did start reading that earlier this month. I read a little bit of the Pillow Book. I don't know Japanese, so I'm not going to even bother saying the title, and I didn't go on Google and Google Translate and see if I can see how you pronounce it. But this is kind of like The Tale of Genji, where you see the life of someone living in the palace, in the Emperor's palace during the Heian period. I'm sorry, like I said, I don't know Japanese, and I don't know how to say that. I apologize. Heian period, where this woman is living with the nobility, and her exploring, the court life, and of course there is, a lot of these beautiful poet descriptions about the world around them, about nature, because a lot of Japanese poetry is very much focused on nature and the beauty of the world around them. So yeah, and I was thinking it was an actual story, like with a conflict and plot and everything, but it's really just a diary, this woman's diary. I remember Terry saying it was really good when she found out that I was reading it, and she got me it last year for Christmas. So it really has been a year since I read it. Okay, so the books I just flew across the room were, and I don't feel like they're all the way over there. I don't feel like getting up. Are Shogun, the first part 1, and you guys saw, if you watched my video on what I got for Christmas, I got part 2 to that from Terry, which I kind of basically told her. That was one of the things I basically, in a very obvious hint. I told her that was one of the books, so she remembered. I'm very happy about that she got me part 2. And it's a whole series by James Clavell, so there are more books. And there's the FX show, and there was a mini-series back in the 90s, I believe. But there's also an FX TV show, and they're doing a season 2, or they did do a season 2. I don't know if they're going to do the other books or not. But that one is this English man comes to, and he's called a pilot. I thought he was he would be considered the captain, but I guess he's not the captain of the ship. This Blackthorn, they're going to what they consider the Japans, that's what they call it. They don't say Japan, they say Japans. They're trying to find it, because this is in, like, I don't know what era it's in. But they're trying to find it, and, and it's like, it takes them years to get there. But they finally, or like months or weeks or whatever, to get there. I shouldn't say years. I don't think it was years. And they end up crash landing there, and now they're captives in Japan. Fortunately, though, where there is a communication barrier, because Blackthorn does not know the Japanese language, he doesn't know the culture very well, so he comes off as just very disrespectful, because he's very angry and frustrated, and very confused, so his response is passive-aggressive, very aggressive towards them, and how he doesn't understand things, like, there's one word he's told when he's trying to ask the woman who's kind of helping him take care of him and everything, and he's like, what's your name? And she gives him this name, but it turns out it's the term for woman, and he keeps saying it, thinking, no, I want this person, thinking it's her name. But so there's a little bit of lack of communication, and this was during the time when the Protestant religion came to be. Like, this is after that has happened, so the Catholics do not trust the Protestants. They think they are they are the bad guys, they are not Christians. And so there's this Portuguese priest that's living in Japan, in the Japans, and he's already has a relationship with these people, but they also don't trust him. They're willing to listen to him, and they respect him and let him live there. But their relationship is a little rocky. They don't completely respect him and don't completely take him seriously. And when he sees Blackthorn, he's like, he's an enemy of God, he's a bad guy, he's a prisoner, he's a pirate. And they think he's a pirate. These people see him, Blackthorn, and his crew, as pirates. So they're captives now, they're prisoners. And unfortunately, this Portuguese priest is his only link to communication with these people. Blackthorn's only link to communication. So that's where I am right now in the book. And then I'm also starting reading The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. And this is a book about this young man. He is an orphan. Or at least his parents died, so he lives with his aunt and uncle, and his uncle wanted him to be, I think, a lawyer. And when he ends up going to school, he wanted to be a writer, an author, or a writer, or a poet, or I don't remember. and he ends up discovering the a class on visceral realism, but it's not what he expected. The teacher's kind of an ass and disrespectful, and there's things that he doesn't know that our main character knows. Garcia something is his name. And he ends up meeting out in the real world, he does come across these visceral poets in this group of people, including this woman who he falls in love with. And he sees her in this angelic light. And she's the sister of a woman who is dating one of his friends, or hooking up with one of his friends. And there are parts of the book that are very uncomfortable to read, very hard to read, because the way these other men he's come across talk about the woman our main character is trying to be with and have a relationship with and is dating, the way these other guys talk about her so vulgar and rude and disgusting, and just very hard to read those parts. I just kind of skimmed it, which is funny and concerning, because it just, doing that kind of made me think of, lately I've been watching a lot of videos that are discussing how there are people on book talk who are talking about skimming things and skipping parts. They just want to get to the action and the exciting parts, and they don't care about the person's thoughts and feelings and stuff like that. And how there are some people who are like, saying, well, sometimes there are parts we do skim. Even the people that we're avid readers, and we read everything, and we're very passionate about reading, and we really care about it. And how some people were pointing out that, well, yeah, there are parts, now that I think thinking about, there are some of us who do skim parts that we just don't like reading. So skimming isn't necessarily the worst crime you can commit. When it comes to books, it just depends on how much you skim. I mean, if there are parts you just cannot have a hard time reading, but you like the rest of the book, you enjoy the rest of the book, then I think it's not a crime if there are parts of it you just don't want to read. You just really cannot stand, and it takes away some of the joy. Like, I know that you need to hear, some people may believe that you need to hear everything, read everything in the book. Which, yeah, I understand why you would say that's important, but I think it's not necessarily, like I said, I don't think it's a crime if there are bits of it, little bits here and there that you skim, because you just don't want to read them. And it's not just like, oh, I don't care about that, let's get to the fun stuff. But it's just that there are some parts of it you just don't feel comfortable reading. But so I'm reading that. Now, the book I made the most progress on is probably my reread of Touch Me Not. Again, I still don't know if I'm saying the actual title, Noli Me Tangrier. I still don't know if I'm saying it right or not. And I've kind of already talked about this. It's kind of hard to, I don't know if I can really talk about it again until I finish it, and then I do an actual review, because last time I didn't do a review because I felt like I couldn't really do a good thorough review of it. Well, this time I'm going to try to change that. I did decide to look up some things. Look at the History of the Philippines, a History of the Philippines book that I read earlier this year, because as I'm filming it's still 2024. And I wrote some stuff down, like when the Philippines, the era that the Philippines took over, the Spanish took over the Philippines. I wrote that down and everything. I have not got it yet, but there is a biography, I think, on Rizal that I would love to read. I did get another, if you saw what I got for Christmas video already, I mentioned that there was a book by another much shorter book by Rizal that I received from Terry as a gift. The Indolence of the Filipino, or something like that. But I'm trying to read as much of Rizal as I can get access to, is available to me in English translations, because sadly I do not know Tagalog and I don't know Spanish. But there are things in this book that I kind of misinterpreted last time, then finally realized, oh, that's what it was. Or, oh, wait, they're referring to this character. There's little moments like that throughout this, and I definitely had more awareness of what's going on in the plot. And I still feel like the romance is very sweet and endearing, but at the same time, it just feels like lackluster, the romance in the story. I don't care about it as much. And I didn't really care about that much last time. I just was like, oh, it's very sweet and cute, and I admire our main character, how she was not gonna just go with, oh my, just do what everyone expects of her. And you gotta admire her. I do admire the guy's Bear's love interest. But I do feel like we didn't really get to know her that well when I first read this, and I don't think that's gonna change all of a sudden. I do think maybe I'll notice things more about her the second time around. But yeah, I really don't know what I can say because I've already talked about it once. I've already, like, last January. But yeah, as I said earlier when I was talking about Passage to India, it's funny that I began in 2024 with this book, having read this book in the beginning of the year, and then I'm kind of ending the year with Passage to India. Not really, because I read Dragon Shadow, but Passage to India I read, earlier in December. So it kind of in a way, kind of like these two books kind of bookend the year, sort of. But I'm not finished with this one, so I'm not ending this in. But anyway, I'm really liking this, and I do want to continue my Filipino project and read more books. I do have a couple more to read this year. Lola's House, which I think is a collection of short stories, or maybe essays. I don't know. I don't know if they're fiction or not. And then there's one more. There is Tree and My Brother, My Executioner, which are the next two books in their Rosales series. Books 2 and 3. I still don't know if I'm saying that correctly or not. But like I said, I'm also rereading this. And at some point, I do have, on Third Books, I do have a free book. So at some point before, there's a date in January where that will expire. So I'm going to go, I got to make sure to do that. So that is my wrap up for December 2024, not 24. I'm going to probably film my favorites video, my favorite books for the year. Probably tomorrow. But because I need a little more time to think about it, so I don't know what my favorites are this year yet, as of today when I'm filming this. So I will film that tomorrow. If you guys like this video, please give a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification below if you want to be notified about my latest videos. And I will talk to you later. All right, bye.